Hi everyone. So today what we're going to have a look at is how to plan and answer an 8-mark question in AS psychology, and I've chosen the biological approach. So the question we're going to look at today is evaluate the role of the central nervous system, the CNS, and neurotransmitters in explaining human behavior for 8 marks. Now, an 8-mark question will normally have 4 AO1 marks and 4 AO3 evaluative. Okay, so descriptive and evaluative marks. Even though, note, the question does say evaluate the role, we do still need to describe, and there are AO1 descriptive marks available. It is a little bit misleading, okay, so always remember that for an 8-mark question, there is AO1 descriptive and AO3 evaluation. Okay, so what I've done is I've produced a little plan with some bullet points, and I'm going to go through briefly and just talk through the plan first. Okay, so just always remember, when you do have an extended mark question, 8 marks plus, always spend a couple of minutes planning first. Okay, it makes a big difference. So let's go through this in a bit more detail. So firstly, AO1 descriptive. Okay, what this question really is asking you is really to discuss how the central nervous system, so the biology and neurotransmitters is obviously the chemicals, so how the biology and chemicals explains human behavior or has an effect on human behavior. Okay, so for AO1 descriptive, we can start off really by looking at some of the research that we've come across on brain functioning and how this affects our behavior. So you should have looked at parts of brain such as the amygdala, the hypothalamus, and really their role in how they affect human behavior. So obviously start off by looking at the brain functioning of these parts of the brain. You can also then go on to really talk about the biological influences. So for example, human behavior here we can define as an example could be aggression. So we can say, how does biological influences, so how does the amygdala and hypothalamus lead to aggressive behavior, for example? Okay, so you have looked at the role of amygdala and how that can lead to aggressive behavior. Now the neurotransmitters part of the question is obviously the chemicals. So here examples are serotonin, dopamine. Okay, and then you can talk really about how they are implicated in aggression. So obviously what happens to the levels of the neurotransmitters, do they go higher or lower, etc. And how do they affect human behavior? So keep coming back to those words that I've highlighted in red in the question. The influence of recreational drugs. So you should have looked at some examples of recreational drugs such as heroin, cannabis. And what you really need to say is how they affect the central nervous system and how they affect human behavior. Okay, so those are just examples of, the descriptive AO1 part of the question. Okay. Going on to the evaluation, the AO3 parts. So this is again where you're going to be using really research and examples of studies, okay, to support your descriptions. So you might want to go back through your textbooks and notes and really have a look and make a list really of all the studies that you can use in this question. Okay, so research on aggression should be supported by these studies. What you're really doing here in the AO3 evaluation, you are critically evaluating whether biology and the central nervous system and hormones and chemicals are the only influences on behavior. Now, the biological approach would say yes, this is the main really explanation of human behavior. However, other approaches, such as the learning approach, would have a different stance on this, okay, on the causes and the influences of human behavior. So what you're doing is critically evaluating really the claims of the biological approach. Some examples of studies that you could use. So remember AO3 evaluation, you must use research studies, okay? Studies such as Rain et al. Is the classic study in the biological approach, which looks at the brain differences between murderers and non-murderers, so that's a good one to use. Also, Dabbs and Hargrove, 97, they looked at a study on hormones. These are all examples of studies in the textbook. okay, in the biological section. So do have a look in the textbook and just make a list of some examples of studies. You don't need many, about 3 or 4 really for a question like this, okay, and just learn them and revise those particular studies. Okay, so there you go, really, a plan really for an 8-mark question, AO1 and AO3.